Hey guys, Pedro here to tell you about the latest from Witherfall, Sounds of the Forgotten, out May 31st on Deathwave Records. The album has 10 tracks, 55 minutes in length, and this is the band's fourth full-length studio album. They are an American melodic metal band. Now, when I looked at this album and I pressed play, I was taken back by the design, by the overall structure of this record. Very different from previous albums in terms of the chaos that they infused in this record. It felt a lot more chaotic, it felt a little bit more all over the place, a lot more of a roller coaster ride than previous albums from the band. And you see that from the get-go. The first song has this great tempo to it. They Will Let You Down. I mean, this is a great song to start off the record. Then right after that comes a ballad. Then it comes a song again with a little bit of a higher tempo. Then later down the road you have interludes that come in between songs that don't really add anything to the track that came before or the track that comes after. They almost work as individual songs, but they're kind of an interlude. So it's an album that just throws a lot of different looks, a lot of different feels, a lot of different perspectives at the listener. And when you start to see an album like this, at least from afar, it feels chaotic, it feels disconnected, or at least gives you the impression that that's going to be the experience of the album itself. For this record, I didn't feel that. I actually felt the opposite. The album felt a lot more comfortable to me as a listener to sit in from the first song all the way to the last, even if the tracks are very different from one another, even if the tracks have this ability to go from 0 to 100 from song to song, and even if the interludes don't necessarily create a perfect segue. I feel like the reason for that is the more direct approach that some of these songs have. And the interludes help extend the album. They help give the album a little bit more of a footprint that without them, the songs would feel perhaps more disconnected because the abrupt motion between one and the other would be more severe and would be a lot more noticeable. So adding these interludes kind of softens the blow, extends the footprint of the record, and allows you to navigate this roller coaster ride a little bit better. And overall, it gives more significance to what the idea, to what the experience of an album as a whole is all about. So not necessarily my choice when it comes to putting an album together to go with this approach, but for this album, for this sound, for what they created, it worked perfectly. Now, as far as the sound is concerned on the album, I already said it has more of a direct approach, and I really think that's a key factor. It doesn't mean that this album doesn't have the melodic side of Witherfall or even the progressive side of Witherfall. I feel like both are there. Perhaps the progressive side a little bit less noticeable, but still there nevertheless. But it's definitely an album that has a little bit more heaviness. And when it has more heaviness, you tend to make things a little bit more direct, a little bit more straight to the point. And this album overall is a lot more of that. It doesn't hide things as much. It doesn't overlayer everything. You don't have to peel a million layers to get to the nuts and bolts of what the song is all about. This album carries its emotions on its sleeve, and that simplifies the processes of the songs, and it definitely simplifies the way you see the record, the way you enjoy the record, and definitely the way you connect with the record. So the simplification, or at least the apparent simplification of the sound by creating a more heavy, driven, more direct sound approach definitely makes this a more playable album all around. And all the essence of the band is still there. It's just packaged differently. On top of this, you have an album that has this incredible production behind it, really modern production behind it, but it has an old school vibe, not an old school sound. And I think there's an importance in terms of distinguish between the two. Sounding old school or having an old school atmosphere is not quite the same thing. This album does not sound old school. It has that modern production. It sounds very modern. It's very crisp, very well put together. But the vibe that you're getting from the songs, the vibe that you're getting from this apparently disconnected record, it's pretty much a throwback style and a throwback way of building an album. If you look at great records of the past, bands like Queen or even King Diamond to a certain extent, Blind Guardian, Iron Maiden, some of their best records are not necessarily albums that flow perfectly from song to song, that have this almost continuous motion, uninterrupted motion from song to song. all of them have individual characteristics that allow each song to stand out and give quality to the overall collective. This album is a little bit like that. It has that old school vibe, it has that old school aroma, but that modern production behind the sound that really elevates the quality of what you're listening to. And one of the things that I felt was really important in this record, in order to stay melodic but not go perhaps overboard and become a little bit more modern melodic, is the way the pianos and keys come across. A lot of bands these days overuse them, have them as one of the main protagonists of the stories that they're telling, and they almost forget about the guitar, drums, and to a certain degree even the vocals. The keys seem to take over the soundscape of the record and hide everything else underneath it. On this album, that's not the case. You still hear the keys throughout the entire record. They add melody as they should. In some cases, they also add this melancholy that comes with the specific sound, but I felt like they were more important in order to create an atmosphere and in order to take some of these songs into that old school vibe. If you're looking at some of the tracks on this record, the 80s experience, the 80s aroma is alive and well throughout this record, and more often than not, that aroma comes from the keys, it comes from the piano, from the melodies that it creates, and how it is interlaced with the rest of the sound, with the rest of the components, like the guitars. And when it comes to the guitars, Jake is incredible. I think he was able to create an album that still showcases all of his great attributes, all of the things that he does phenomenally well. But like I said earlier, it feels a little bit more streamlined, it feels a little bit more heavy, a little bit more direct, a little bit more to the point, and that gives you the sensation of being simplified. But when you listen to this album, you can see all the great work that he's putting in, either being the leads, the riffs, the solos, the melodies. He does a phenomenal job guitar-wise from beginning to end on this record, really becoming one of the cornerstones, one of the pillars of the album, but presenting them in a more streamlined way, which I think goes further as far as the playability of the album and as far as your experience when you sit down to listen to it. It doesn't feel as cumbersome as some of the previous records perhaps did. Now, as far as bass and drums, I enjoyed the warmth that they give the album. A lot of that sense of heaviness, or at least the parameters of where that heaviness exists, is defined by the drums and the bass, and they had an important role on this record and in creating that shape and creating some shape for these songs and creating some of the foundation of these tracks. So I don't think it needs to. I don't think it should go unsaid, even though this album really lives off of guitars and vocals, but all the other elements are playing a very important role, and without them, those two are not able to deliver what they delivered consistently from first to last. And when you talk about vocals, you have to talk about Joseph Michael's performance. I honestly felt like he unlocked another level. Like he just, this is where he was going, he decided to go a step further. This is a phenomenal record from him, and his range, his dynamic approach to these songs is outstanding. You have 10 songs on this record, and if you told me that there are at least 8 different singers on the album, I would believe you, because that is how dynamic his range is on this record. Anywhere from almost a Blind Guardian style approach to a King Diamond, and everything in between, is such a dynamic album vocally, with so much strength, so much warmth, incredible range, incredible delivery, the layers, the textures around the vocals in order to create a more sense of depth to them, and also create more depth in terms of what the lyrical content is trying to deliver, which makes it for a very interesting dynamic. While the songs feel more streamlined, the vocals feel more complex. So the dynamic between the two really worked well from beginning to end to make this, in my humble opinion, their best album to date. I have no doubts about that. At least for me, this is my favorite album by Witherfall by far. I think it's the one, while having a strange design and a strange structure, is the one that offers the easier to listen songs and the most catchy and hooky songs that they have ever written, both musically and vocally. It's just an earworm of an album. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with that opening track, They Will Let You Down. Great opening track, very heavy, very driven. bringing in a little bit of a King Diamond vocal style approach, and then the vocals really become dynamic and become the perfect partner for that heavier driven sound that the track has. The drums help define the size, the volume, the heaviness of the track, and then the chorus. The chorus has this amazing piano melody behind it, interlaced with it, that it's so somber, that adds such a great vibe, that it brings a little bit of that 80s experience into the track, but the melancholy, the somberness of that piano in that chorus really elevates not only the quality of it, but how memorable it becomes. And all around you have guitars that really soar. This is a great opening song because it has all the condiments that you're going to see throughout the entire album in one single track, and you want to start off the track to the races, and I mean, you want to start off the album off to the races, and this track definitely does that. Next, we have my favorite song on the entire record, Sounds of the Forgotten. Now, this is more of a ballad. I would go as far as to say a power ballad, because it has the ballad elements, but it still has quite a bit of oomph in it. Now, I also like the 80s vibe of this song. It's not really defined just by one element. I think it's actually more defined by the design itself and by the overall experience that it offers. The style of song has a little bit of 80s in it, and you see that also in the way the vocals approach the track. It's a super textured and layered song, but it comes across very warm, very simple, and very straightforward. The chorus is super explosive, catchy, hooky, with great vocals, with great layers. And this is a track where the guitars don't soar like they do in They Will Let You Down. This is a track where the vocals soar because they're just phenomenal. And the chorus becomes that beacon that you cannot wait for, that everything is building up towards. Last but definitely not least, What Have You Done? This is literally the last song on the record, is the closing track, over 10 minutes. And I think this is the most progressive song on the record, not just because it's 10 minutes or over the 10-minute mark, just the elements that this song have kind of allow you to see a little bit of the end of the road. It's a song that almost gives you a recap. The way you look at the opening track, They Will Let You Down, the song that kind of opens the book and gives you snippets of what the record is going to be all about. This song has a sense of finality, and it kind of brings everything together under one single umbrella, and that allows the song to be a little bit more progressive, to feel a little bit more outside the box. Definitely the most unique and different song that the record offers. It has, like I said, great layers, great texture, great sounds. The keys are amazing on this song, and the guitar sound offers a lot of different looks, a lot of different sounds, a lot of different experiences, allowing itself to be dynamic, but also allowing the vocals to be equal dynamic to it. This is it, Witherfall, Sounds of the Forgotten, out May 31st on Deathwave Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Hit me up in the comment section, and I'll see you all at the next video. Take care, guys.